Xin chào, YouTube, and for those of you who don't know, Xin chào means hello in Vietnamese. I personally did not know that until a few days ago. I'm kidding. Of course, I learned that right away. That's one of the first things you learn when you go to a foreign country. But that's what it means, Xin chào, hello. And today on Jinka Jabo, I'm going to talk about why I still eat meat. Right, well, I guess I'll start with a funny story from when I was a kid. I remember when I was like 7 years old, I went up to my parents, I went up to my dad, I think, and I said, I'm a vegetarian. And the fact is, I didn't know what that word meant. And when he got really concerned and said, so you're not going to eat meat anymore, it occurred to me that I didn't even know what all had meat in it. And that's something that I'm still sorting through as an adult. In truth, I probably just heard the word and thought, oh, that sounds kind of cool. It sounds like vampire or something. I can be one of those. I had no idea what it was. It reminds me of another moment from my childhood when my older brothers would pick on me, my lack of vocabulary, you know. I had one brother say to me, so are you a virgin? And I said, no, of course not. It sounded horrible, whatever that was. I insisted that I wasn't one. And so then they asked me, so are you a lesbian? And I thought, well, what, I should say yes. So I said yes, and they made fun of me for that. And boys, if you happen to see this video, I'm still upset about that. It scarred me for life, honestly. Meat. We're going to talk about meat today. One of the two books, it's downstairs, I'm not going to run downstairs and get it, but I brought a copy of Animal Liberation by Peter Singer with me to Vietnam. It's one of only two books I brought. I brought that and Dwight Goddard's Buddhist Bible. And Peter Singer's book is something that, it was a copy that I had given to my older brother, who is himself a pescatarian. We have one in the family right now. I think maybe one of my other brothers, I'm from a big family, one of my other brothers might be on a vegan diet. But I find that hard to believe. I don't know. What is a vegan diet? Everything has meat or the suffering of animals attached to it. Anyway, when I was a kid, I didn't know what a vegetarian was. I just thought the word was cool. And I didn't really learn what it was until much later. And I remember when I first learned what it was, I thought it was kind of a stupid idea. Because, I had a difficult relationship with animals when I was a kid. I didn't really like dogs or cats. They freaked me out. Well, I guess cats I was okay with. More so when I was a teenager, but I just didn't like being around animals. I'd go to a friend's house or something, and it would seem weird, you know, if they had a bird or stuff. All these families, these middle-class families had weird pets and stuff. I don't like these sleeves right now. So, when I found out what it was, I thought, if God didn't want us to eat animals, why did he make them out of meat? I saw that saying on a friggin' t-shirt in Madison when I moved there as a teenager. But looking at the ethics of Peter Singer, where it's a case of speciesism, and, there are all these thought experiments that he gives that are very common with vegetarians, like if an alien species came to our planet and they were more advanced than us, we want them treating us the same way that we treat lesser, smaller, less advanced animals. Lesser animals. I cringe when I say that because that seems rude when you're talking speciesism, but that's one of however many isms. And of course, it's hard to kill animals. I don't like doing it. Even the first time I caught a fish, it felt kind of weird, taking the hook out of its mouth. I could sense there was some level of pain going on with that poor little fish. But I decided more than once, but most recently, shortly before I came to Vietnam, that I would go vegetarian again. And even last year, I went vegan. I went full-on vegan for like a month. I actually pulled it off, which surprisingly easy here in Vietnam, but what started that? Why was I thinking animals again? Well, before I came to Vietnam, I got really deep into Buddhism for a while. I was meditating for like an hour a day for a while, and I'd take my brother's dog for a walk, and we'd see a Buddha statue in the neighbor's yard, and that got me thinking. And then I got turned on to all this great Buddhist literature, like Rinsler, is that how you say his name? And 10% Happier by Dan Harris. That was a great book. And I read A Life of Milarepa, and I got really into Buddhism. And I thought, well, it goes totally in line with Buddhist teaching to give up eating meat, because that's one of the precepts: do not take life. Even though there is some argument, I read an article about the Buddha is rumored to have had pork as one of his last meals. But that's one of those translation things where it might be a type of fungus that had the word pork in its name, or it might have been actual meat. I mean, Buddhists themselves differ quite a bit. There are those who are hardline vegans, and then there are those who eat meat. It's much more open than, say, drinking alcohol, which committed Buddhists shouldn't do. But even Rinsler, I mean, he talks about drinking. He named one of his books The Buddha at the Bar. But I got way into that. And one night I went out with my boss. And River Ryan, if you're watching, shout out to you, buddy. And we just had a very outlandish, wild, fun time. And going to the bars and the parks and the different sites around it, the suburban Illinois, is centered around his house in the Fox River, up and down the Fox River. It was him and this Army vet guy. I didn't know who he was, but he had Arabic tattooed on his neck, which I was able to read. It was kind of not the strangest thing that happened that night. But I got home to my brother's house at like 5 a.m. or something, which wasn't unusual for me because I worked late nights doing the taxi driving stuff. But I turned on the news and I saw it was out of Wisconsin, I think. A cow had escaped from a slaughterhouse and was just running fearfully. And I watched that, and it was one of those moments where I was like, oh God, the reality of the suffering, the reality of the death just hit me in the face. It was hard to handle. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to give up meat altogether. And so I stopped eating meat. And I was able to maintain that for a while. I got to Vietnam, and I remember the first thing I smelled. The first smell I can remember was on a bus into the old quarter from the airport. And the door opens, and I'm able to smell some food, some Vietnamese dish, and it just smells so good. And it's got like beef or pork or something. It was some savory meat smell to it. And I thought, wow, that smells really good. That's a good sign, but of course I can't eat that. That's off limits. I'm eating meat. Okay, so I was able to stay off of meat, and I cracked at one point. I think someone offered me something exotic. They eat some strange animals here. Not just dogs. They eat dogs, of course, but someone offered me some tortoise and some horse one night. It was something for my job. They all took us out for dinner, to apologize for being a shitty job. You know how schools do that. Anyone who's taught overseas knows what I'm talking about. But I thought, okay, well, I've had tortoise, I've had horse, why not? I'll eat some more. Well, for a while, it was just, I'm only okay eating fish because, I can kill a fish and eat it. But then I was like, yeah, to hell with it. I feel good about eating meat again. Even though I do mourn the loss of that poor cow. Or I don't know, in my head, I don't know the end of the story. They didn't go that far. But in my head, the story ends where they gave the cow to some farm in upstate Wisconsin, and it lived the remainder of its days free and healthy and happy. But I doubt that's how it worked. I'm pretty sure he ended up eating anyway. Cows don't live that long anyhow. But in cow years, when he was my age, did that cow think about his upcoming death? Or when he was a teenage cow, or just a boy cow, was he sitting there thinking, yeah, this is all that it leads to. This all goes down to me being on somebody's plate. Or did he just go through whatever hard to define, extrapolate the parameters of, but at least quantifiably less advanced thinking, experiential reasoning, emotional development, memories that humans do, because there is no comparison between the human brain and the cow brain, for example. But this is kind of extreme thinking. And yes, I get it. I get that factory farms are terrifying. And, if I could just eat free-range animals all the time, I would. Hard to say that that's what happens here in Vietnam, even though a lot of fortunate chickens just get to run around in the streets. But added to all this, it's my red pilling, man. It's getting turned on to Jesus again, and the Bible again, and to this whole different range of political ideas that I had ignored. And the idea of just being some liberal cuck vegan guy, just it doesn't jibe with my personality anymore, because I've changed a lot. And I'm sorry that animals have to suffer, but I will say this: I have started speaking up about being pro-life now, and making that a big point for me, and trolling people online who talk about how great it is to be pro-choice. There's one guy, I forget how I know him, maybe through Quakers or something, but he wrote a book called You Should Consider an Abortion. And so I asked him, the easiest counter to that is, would you have wanted to be aborted? And he said, well, what about if you had a foreign entity living inside of you against your will? And then some other woman posted, oh, well, if it would have been safe for my mother, if it would have been unsafe for my mother to have me, I would hope that she would have had an abortion, which I thought was completely specious. Come on, because how can you possibly know that? And you're only here to say that because she didn't make that choice. I looked it up today. There are hundreds and thousands of abortions going on every year in the United States. I think the last number I saw was in 2014. There was something like 600,000. And so I have a hard time believing that in every one of those cases it was because the woman's life was in danger. I just don't think that's statistically possible. Call me crazy. But then someone said, oh, well, the biggest abortionist of all is God. Why don't you take it up with God? Because billions of babies are never born. Well, that's not the same thing. A miscarriage and an abortion are two different things. You go to a clinic to get an abortion. A woman doesn't sign up to meet God to have her baby eliminated. That's the terminology someone I knew back when used. She said, if I'm pregnant, this was a Korean woman I knew. She said, if I'm pregnant, I'll just eliminate it. Such cold translation of how we speak. But it's a translation of what's already happening anyway. It's euphemisms is what it is. So I feel sorry, man. I'm sorry for all the cows. I feel sorry for the cow that died for this jacket. But and I feel sorry for the last 5 or 10 hamburgers I ate. But I think humans are important, and if we can't even get our priorities straight, if we can't even say that human life is sacred and we need to protect it, then what kind of self-hating nonsense is that? Compassion for all things, right? You got to start somewhere, man. And we got to speak up for the oppressed children. There are so many that never get a chance to say to me on Facebook, well, I would have wanted to be aborted if that would have been my mother's decision. Somehow I don't believe that. But man, I love eating meat. I wish I could stop, but that's low on my priorities. And you know what? It's actually pretty nutritious for you. And it gets a bad rap. Everyone says, oh, I just love meat because of its taste. Well, no. There's more to it than the taste. There's a feeling that comes with it. And you can say, okay, it's not much different eating a dog or a pig. Would you eat a dog? And I'm like, well, I have. I don't care, man. Woof, woof.